Hello, everyone. Um, this is Eric Nussbaum, and thanks for spending your lunch with me. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about ethics. I don't have my housekeeping slide on this presentation, I realize, so a few housekeeping items. Please keep yourself muted if possible, or I do have the magic mute all button, and I will use it. That way we won't get feedback. However, if you do have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or put them in the chat box. I will be monitoring that chat box. And this is a training I think that's really important for folks. And because ethics is one of those areas that can get you in trouble. And unlike a lot of mistakes you might make accidentally on public meeting law and public records law, violations of ethics do have some penalties associated with them. I want to tell you that I am not a lawyer. All of you should know that. And that the discussion we have today and the talk and the ideas I come up with shouldn't be construed as legal advice. If you want legal advice, you should talk to lawyers, or as I'll discuss at the very end, the Oregon Ethics Commission, which does investigate ethics violations. You do pay an annual fee to, and they are there to help you answer your ethics questions in detail. I think I know everyone out there. I only see, well, actually, I guess I see about 2 names I don't recognize. So just real briefly, most of you do know me. My name is Eric Nussbaum, and I do the trainings and provide operational technical assistance to the soil and water conservation districts around the state. A long time ago in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, I was the manager at the SWCD Soil and Water Conservation District out in the coast of Lane County. And then after that, I became a water quality specialist at ODA. Did that for about 4, 5, 6 years. I can't even remember now. And for the last 10 years-ish, I have been doing this job of trainings, which I really enjoy. Most of these trainings, an hour, you could spend a long time on ethics. So this isn't like the huge deep dive, but it's deeper than what I do for the new director, new employee training. Do ask questions if you have any situations that have occurred or may occur. Feel free to ask them, and we'll be glad to talk through them. So getting started, if I can get there we go. So who is responsible for ethics? Ethics are restrictions on what you can do for both you and relatives. We'll define those in a moment. And it's your personal responsibility to understand the laws. Not knowing the laws, not being told that your board didn't tell you or your staff didn't train you, or for the staff it wasn't in your personnel policy or any other kind of policy, that does not absolve you from any responsibilities. And when it comes to the Ethics Commission, you saying, I just didn't know and no one told me, doesn't fly with them. So this is important information for you, your board, and your staff to know because you are responsible for it. So who is covered by ethics law? Public officials are covered, and public officials is defined as, well, the elected officials, as you know, employees, and then also what are called agents of the district. An agent of the district is someone who might be acting on behalf of the district. One example of that was that there was a district who hired a contractor to go to a trade show in the Far East to promote a local commodity. And in that case, that person, even though they were a contractor, was acting on behalf of the district and was acting as an agent of the district. Also, there are several districts out there who have such a heavy workload but can't hire another person. They use contractors often to go speak and meet with landowners on behalf of the district. This is different than just hiring kind of an excavator, or a crew to plant trees, but actually someone who's speaking and presenting information on behalf of the district, perhaps then working on some conservation plans on behalf of the district. that would be considered an agent of the district too. And while they're working on behalf of the district, they're public officials covered under this law. Also, volunteers of a regular nature. So if you have someone coming in the office on a regular basis to do administrative work, to do filing, even though they're a volunteer, they would be considered a public official. Occasional one-off volunteers, such as people volunteering to do tree planting or coming in once a year to do with a plant sale and help volunteer with that, they would not be considered a public official because they're not a regular volunteer. So all those people are called public officials. Then we have relatives, and we'll define relative in just a moment. Members of the household, that should be obvious. Anyone who lives in your house. Business with which you're associated. I wouldn't go through those definition because they have some pretty stringent definitions on what that. So who is a relative? Here is the list of relatives. First partner was added because of the ethics issues with Kitzhaber and his domestic partner. It used to be spouses as siblings, but that was removed a number of years ago. But these are the ones, anyone you have a legal support for. And then the other ones, the last two ones there are more related to when there was the domestic partnership registration. So what is an associated business? There's two definitions. One is for a private or closely held corporation. A closely held corporation is when there's a very limited number of partners or stockholders. And so they define that as if you hold stock in that company or equity interest or debt over $1,000. And that's actually a pretty low threshold, $1,000 for holding debt. So if you loaned $1,000 to someone for them to start a small business, that actually would be a business that you're associated with. On the higher end is a large publicly traded corporation. So if you own stock in a current a publicly traded corporation or a debt instrument of $100,000 or more in a publicly held corporation, that's an associated business, or if you're on the board of directors. The last one there is if for some reason you need to fill out those annual verified statements of economic interest and the business is listed, then you would have to, board members do not have to, SWCD board members do not have to fill out that form. However, if you SWCD board members may hold another public office, they may have to do that. So the basic law is written here. I filled it out in detail, but the underlying parts are the most important. A lot of times we call it the but-for clause. But for your position as a board member or employee or agent of the district, if you could gain a financial advantage or avoidance of financial detriment, you're not allowed to do it. So some very simple examples of this law. Using a copy machine in your office. Because that copy machine usually is not open to the members of the public to make copies on, if you do any personal copying on that copy machine, that would be an ethics violation because the public is not allowed to. On the other hand, if you have a standing policy that staff or board members or members of the public can use that copy machine and pay 10 cents a copy, then that would be fine because that allows everyone to use that copy machine equally. Another one might be the use of district vehicles. Maybe you're moving and you have a big piece of equipment, and you have access to a district vehicle that can hold that piece of equipment, and you like to move it. That would be a violation of ethics law. Even if it was, you have it for the day and you just want to, move something from here to there, the member of the public can't do that, so that'd be a violation of ethics law. So just think about, can the public use some equipment or resources of the district that the public isn't able to? That would be an ethics violation for kind of those physical resources and stuff. But then there's also some financial issues. So before we go into kind of those financial issues, it's actually good to look at the exceptions list here. Um, if there's a compensation package, that's fine. Honorariums, they have to be honest honorariums. Used to be when I was a water quality specialist, I would be asked to talk about water quality rules at a realtor's meeting. And then when I was done, they would give me a $50 gift card for some restaurant. That is perfectly fine as long as it's unexpected. You don't expect to have that. And it's not an honorarium if you expect to be given, in air quotes, a compensation. The one that we're going to talk about right here is gifts from sources that have an administrative or legislative interest up to $50 per calendar year. So none of you are making laws. You're not in the legislature, so you don't have to worry about legislative interest, but you do have to worry about administrative interest. So an administrative interest would be where you're making any decisions, either as a employee, staff person, most likely district manager, someone who goes out and make purchases, or as a board member, where you might be making contracting decisions. So the law says that if you have some kind of interest with this business or person out there, then you can't receive the gifts up to more than $50 per calendar year. So a really good example of this is something most of you have probably heard from me if you've heard this before. When I was the manager at the SWCD, I had certain authority up to I can't remember $5,000 or $10,000 to sign contracts. And also to determine who's going to do certain projects and who we're going to hire. We had a lot of small grants and small projects that easily using an excavator to put logs in a stream or dig out stuff or whatever. We do a lot of contracting work with a very particular excavator person because they were available, they did a lot of work, and they were inexpensive. We'd often get together, sometimes over lunch, to talk about projects, to get clarification on contracts, and he'd offer buy me lunch every now and again. That is perfectly fine as long as that total amount per calendar year did not exceed $50. That also could happen to be if you use a certain vendor and they want to come and give you like a gift basket or something like that. Again, that's fine, just not up to more than $50 per calendar year. You might notice that when you go to a lot of like the SDAO conference, the OACD conference or Connect, and there's some vendors there showing their wares, and they have gifts or they have like baskets or things like that that you could win. Most of those will be under the value of $50 per calendar year for that reason. Some folks will get gifts worth more than $50 per calendar year from a vendor. The best thing to do in that case is you go ahead and you share it with everyone in the office instead of taking it all for yourself. So remember, this is also related to your relatives. So your spouse or your parents, that is actually covered under this too. So that particular vendor has to be careful about giving gifts more than $50 per calendar year to one of your relatives. So in this case, if you have a vendor who, you just decline to be taken out for lunch, make sure they don't take your spouse, your husband or your wife out to lunch too, or your parents. Well, you can, but just not up to $50. So is that clear about the $50 rule? You can see everyone nodding their head perhaps because there's only one person on camera, which is totally fine. All right, I'm going to go on then. Here's a couple additional prohibitions. I think one of the ones that's most important here is the middle one there. Public officials may not use confidential information for personal gain. Often some of the boards do take a look at confidential information. They might be looking at farm plans that include business plans inside of them. And those business plans may have confidential information that if the board member could use for their own advantage, and that's not permissible. Is there any questions on that? Chat box is nice and empty. Okay. Then we're going to talk about actual or potential conflict of interest. So if you have a conflict of interest, and we're going to talk about what they are, post potential and actual. If you're an employee, you have to notify your appointing official, that's just a fancy term for your supervisor, in writing about the conflict. So that can be done through email, and essentially the public employee, in most cases that's going to be a manager or perhaps some staff person who maybe goes out and makes purchases or something like that. In writing, send an email saying, I have a conflict of interest, it's potential, it's actual, and please, I do not want to participate in any kind of decision that's being made. For board members, if there is a potential conflict of interest, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, you have to announce publicly in a board meeting the nature of the conflict prior to any discussion or taking action. You need to get that in the minutes. Always, if there's a conflict of interest for a board member, it needs to go into the minutes. That's kind of the same as the writing for the employee. If you end up having an actual conflict of interest, which again, I will discuss in just what that is in just a minute, the board member has to announce publicly what the nature of the conflict is explicitly. And then you have to refrain from participating in the discussion, debate, or vote on the issue. I will look at the question. Al said, you're given a $5 lottery ticket as a gift, but it winds up winning more than $50. What happens? That's a really good question. I'm taking a guess because I believe I saw this before. The value of that lottery ticket is only $5. What you win off of it, I think, is separate. But that's a really good question, and that might be worth talking to the Ethics Commission to ask to get a definitive answer, since I'm not a lawyer. Well, we all wish we can get more than $50 back on that $5 lottery ticket. That's your question, Al? All right, nodding your head, thumbs up. All right, great. Okay, so we have actual and potential conflicts of interest. So an actual conflict of interest means that there would be the effect of a private petitionary benefit or detriment to the person or the relative or the business with which the person or relative is associated. So this is an actual, it's actually going to happen. So what are some of those? Well, some of the obvious ones is if you're voting on a contract in which a relative or a company you own or a company a relative owns would be affected by. And that actually is not, it's both positive or negatively affected by, for that matter. So for instance, it's perfectly fine for one of your board members to own a business that is bidding on a contract, or for a board member's brother or sister or parents. That's perfectly fine, but that would be an actual conflict of interest. It actually happens quite a bit. There are a lot of board members, especially in counties with limited resources and businesses, where some of the board members are the only ones with the equipment to do certain projects or certain skills. Totally fine. But that would be an actual conflict of interest where the board member would announce their conflict of interest, exactly what it is, and refrain from the discussion and voting. Another one that actually some people don't really think about too much is if you have a relative, as defined in statute, who it works as a board between a board member and a staff person. And there are a couple districts where there is this relationship where there is a board member who is related to a staff person. Well, even voting on pay raises, that's a really obvious one. That would be a conflict of interest. But disciplinary action could be too, because that could adversely affect their employment. Also, you could contend that voting on the budget would also be a conflict of interest, because when you vote on the budget, you're essentially declaring that this is what the pay rate for that relative is going to be. If the pay rate is not going to change over that year through the budget, that probably is not going to increase that amount of money or decline that amount of money. So that might be okay, but I would certainly advocate that probably the the person who is related on the board to one of the staff people may not even vote on the budget. Another one is purchasing supplies. So that would be, if you, someone in your office was like going down to purchase supplies at a certain business, and actually they had a relative who owned that business. That would not be okay because that'd be an actual conflict of interest. Any questions about actual conflict of interest? Any questions about some examples? And feel free to turn on your volume if you want to speak about them. They might be more complex than for the chat. I do get quite a lot of questions, and it's fine if you don't want to say them in public here. Feel free always to give me a call and email me if you have any thoughts about what might be legal and not legal. So potential conflict of interest just means that, there could be a benefit or detriment to you or a relative or a business with which you're associated with. A very easy one, very simple one is if you're discussing or voting to solicit bids for a project that you might bid on. So you might be accepting a contract or putting something out to bid, and you might bid on it. Well, just knowing you might bid on it doesn't mean you actually will get the bid, of course. You're hoping to, but not. So you can go ahead and declare a potential conflict of interest, and then go ahead and discuss and vote on it. Sometimes potential conflict of interest is a little more vague, but that's okay. For those who sometimes are connected with federal conflict of interest, the federal conflict of interest is actually different. The federal conflict of interest only has one conflict of interest, and anything that's from vague to actual is considered a conflict of interest for them. But in Oregon, we actually do separate the two between an actual and a potential conflict of interest. We're just going right through these slides here. I was hoping you had a few more questions, but hopefully you get some questions at the end. So some exceptions to conflicts of interest. Because the first one there has more to do with boards, and for particular for our group, SWCDs and stuff, this would be more if a board member was on like the cherry board, and the cherry board was making some kind of decision, one of those commodity boards like that. The second one, though, that does come up sometimes. I have seen it on the east side, where there are some districts who do, for instance, purchase pesticides in bulk and resell them, just because they're so hard to get. And that would, of course, benefit the board members if they also purchase those bulk ordered pesticides. And that's totally fine because the agricultural community, everyone in that agricultural community also benefits from it. Another one would be, it's been a while, at least in my knowledge, maybe in the recent fires, when there's been fires on the east side, the district, purchasing seed or sometimes hay on behalf of the landowners and distributing it, and some of the board members might participate in that distribution. That's totally fine too. That's because everyone in the same class, all the cattle owners or landowners, all the same class, are benefiting equally. The last one is about 501c3s. There is a very particular exemption carved out if you're a membership or a board member in a 501c3. So for instance, you're part of that 501c3, but you sit on the district board, and the district board is voting to make a donation or approve a contract or give a grant to that 501c3 that you sit on the board for. That is perfectly legal to do that. It does get a little gray if you are an employee of that nonprofit, and you just have to be careful that if you're an employee of that nonprofit, that the whatever you're voting for resource-wise, probably financial resources, that financial resource wouldn't affect your position directly. So if you happen to be an executive director of that 501c3 on a district board, and the district was giving a grant that would help pay for your position at the 501c3. That's a bit more gray area, and you'd be best served by declaring a conflict of interest. But general grants to a 501c3 that you're on the board of, or doesn't affect your position at the nonprofit, that is fine. Any questions on those exceptions to the conflict of interest? No? All right, we're getting down here to the end. We're going to be done really quickly, which is fine. It's lunchtime and you can go all eat or maybe take a walk. If you did my time management one and stress management, I encourage you to go out on walks instead of sitting at your desk eating while watching me. So the last exception to a conflict of interest is if your vote is necessary to meet the requirements of a quorum and a minimum number of votes. So if you remember from my other presentations, if you were at them or if you have not, in Oregon and with SWCDs, a positive vote has to be a majority of all the positions, regardless of whether they're filled or they're at the meeting. So a district with 5 board members always have to have 3 yay votes to pass anything. A district with 7 board members always need 4 yay votes to pass anything. And an abstention is not a yay vote. So therefore, say you have a 7-member board, you only have 4 people there. Well, that made the quorum for the meeting so you can conduct business. And but if someone has an actual conflict of interest and they decide to, and they need to abstain from the discussion and the vote because of the actual conflict of interest, that would only allow you to have 3 yay votes. And 3 yay votes is not 4. Again, it's not the total number, it's not a majority of the people that are at the meeting, it's a majority of your total positions. In this case, the law is clear that you are allowed to vote. You cannot participate in the discussion or debate on the issue, but you can actually take the vote. One of my favorite phrases is just because you can does not mean you should. And so you can go ahead and vote to give yourself a $50,000 contract or have the district buy a brand new truck from your brother's auto dealership. Yes, you could do that, but that's probably not the best thing to do. And so what you should do, and to the best of your ability, is perhaps get another board member on the phone or if possible delay the vote. But if you actually have to do that, then you can do that. All right, we have a question from Harney. If you have a 7-person board but only 6 positions filled, do you still need 4 yes votes? Yes, as I said, it's based on the number of positions, not the number of filled positions. So a 7-member board always needs 4 yay votes. And I don't know if you were there the other day, Danielle, but a abstention essentially counts as a nay vote. It does not count as a yay vote. So if you had 4 folks there and 1 abstained, you would only have 3 yay votes, and that does not allow the passage of whatever the motion was. Is that clear? I'd say nod your head, but you're not on video, don't think. So great. If you ever have any questions, go ahead and give me a call. So that's actually it for my presentation. Went through this a lot faster than I expected. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? There is the ethics guide for public officials. That is available both on the training website and also the ethics part of the SWCD program. It also was sent out to all the new directors, and I have copies. You can get it online. Also, the Oregon Ethics Commission, they have great services. You pay your annual assessment, and their job is to answer your questions. And they are actually very good at answering particular questions. The nice thing about them is if you ask them in an email form, they may call and clarify, but they will often email you back an answer, and they'll say that they give you kind of safe harbor because I made a decision. I have another question here. Committees, do they operate with that same thought of 5 members, 3 yes votes, 7 members, 4 yes votes, or the committees their own beast? So we talked a little bit about that in public meeting law. Essentially, a committee is its own board, and so the same rules for public meetings apply to those board committees that are appointed by the board. So in that case, yes, if the committee is 5 people, then that committee, if they're going to pass anything, needs 3 yay votes. If the committee is 7 members, 4. If it's a 6-member committee, you're going to need 4 votes to have a majority vote. So be careful about how many people are appointed to that committee. And again, it's a number of positions, whether they're filled or not, or at the meeting. So that's true with committees. If 9 people have appointed that committee and only 4 show up to a meeting, you don't have an official committee meeting that can do business or approve anything. Is that clear? Can I support a riparian enhancement project on my own property? So the question you would want to look at is, would that riparian project have financial gain or avoidance of financial detriment? And it is based on finances, not on anything else. So you would have to take a look, is it potentially going to gain you any money? If that might be one thing that you would just want to be careful about and at least declare a potential conflict of interest. I could see where if they were tree plantings, and say it was something with a 20-year contract, or CREP with a 15-20-year contract, and then you potentially could go in and harvest those trees. Well, that's a potential conflict of interest. If perhaps by doing a riparian project, you're enhancing the value of your property, and it would sell for more for whatever reason, that might be an actual conflict of interest. So I'd think it through and decide whether there would be an actual conflict of interest, because there might be some financial gain through value of the property going up or avoidance of financial detriment. I would say that if you have some grazing operation, and you needed to put a fence up to control access, because if you didn't, you might be in violation of the ag water quality rules. Well, that might be an actual conflict of interest because you're not having to pay for that yourself. So just think that through and be careful. I would say you'd probably be a potential conflict of interest at the very least, and more likely an actual conflict of interest depending on the project. Any other questions? That's a good question. I like that one. No other questions? All right. Well, then I will go ahead and let you go off to lunch, or I hope for those under stress to take a walk. And I'm going to go actually get some food and take a quick walk myself. Thank you very much. As I said, there's some documents and this presentation, and eventually the recording will be online at our website. And I look forward to seeing you at other sessions today. Thank you very much, and take care.